So in my Jesus and Genesis video, I talk about how a lot of Old Testament laws aren't ideals for us to strive for, but they're actually concessions to sin, that they limit or reduce the wholeness of what God intends for us because of our broken condition. And I got the most beautiful illustration of that literally while I was writing the script for that video that I wanted to share here. So, I was here writing. My kids were actually playing over in the other room. I can see it from here. My youngest too. And it got progressively more and more ugly. It was clear that they were fighting. They weren't getting along. Like I want nothing more than for my kids to play well together, but it was getting ugly. So I went over and I split them apart. I said, guys, you cannot do this. And I said, you guys cannot play in the same room together right now. And I put one in one room and one in another and said, you guys stay there, stay away from each other. Now, is that the entirety of what I intended for my kids for the rest of their lives? Of course not. Is that the ideal for how I hope my kids would interact? Of course not. But it was necessary given their sinfulness, used generously here. But the way they were fighting with each other just forced me to separate them. So I came back over and I'm writing and whatever else. And a little bit later, I kind of hear that they're interacting again. And I look over and they're actually back together, but playing very nicely this time. So I get up and I go over to look a little closer and sure enough, they've come back together, even though I told them to stay apart, and they're playing wonderfully with each other. Now, do you think my reaction was, hey, I told you to stay apart. You better not, Of course not. As a good dad and as someone who wants my kids to experience the wholeness of relationship together, I was delighted that they had come back together, even though I had told them they had to be apart. I hadn't given them any new information. My law, as it were, to them was the same. But my kids know me and they know my heart, and they acted out of the freedom of knowing my heart rather than just out of the fear of my law. And there was something profound in that for me about the way we as Christians should interact with the queer community. Everything I see in scripture says this is how Jesus operated. And I talk in depth in the other video, which I'll link at the end of this, about how he talked about that specifically in relation to marriage and to gender. So check that out, and I hope this little story helps bring it to life.